Breaking. India has just pulled £500 billion in investments from the British economy in the most devastating financial blow to hit the UK this century. Within hours, Prime Minister Starmer was caught begging for mercy in a humiliating late-night call to Prime Minister Modi. Financial markets across London have plunged into chaos. The Bank of England has called an emergency midnight meeting. 3 major British corporations have already announced massive layoffs. And what happened next could permanently cripple Britain's post-Brexit economy for generations to come. If you want to understand how this financial catastrophe unfolds, hit subscribe now because the economic aftershocks will affect every single person in Britain. Here's what sparked this unprecedented economic earthquake. Just 3 days ago, Prime Minister Starmer addressed Parliament regarding Britain's relationship with its Commonwealth partners. What was intended to be a routine foreign policy update quickly transformed into a diplomatic nightmare. The session was scheduled during prime-time viewing hours in India. Every word was being carefully monitored by Indian officials and business leaders. Starmer believed he was delivering a balanced assessment of bilateral relations. But at precisely 3:27 p.m, the Prime Minister made comments about India's human rights record that have now devastated Britain's economic future in Asia. The reaction was seismic. Indian ambassador to the UK, Vikram Doraiswamy, immediately left the diplomatic gallery. By evening, he had been recalled to New Delhi for emergency consultations. By morning, the Indian government had announced measures that sent tremors through global financial markets. In his address, Starmer had criticised India's governance in Kashmir. Britain celebrates its deep historical ties with India, he stated firmly. But true friendship requires honesty. We cannot ignore concerning reports about civil liberties in Kashmir. This government believes the situation requires international attention. The House fell silent. Even Labour backbenchers appeared shocked. Foreign Secretary David Lammy stared at his papers, visibly uncomfortable. But Starmer continued, his voice growing more confident. Furthermore, we are suspending approval of the enhanced trade agreement, pending assurances on human rights protections. Britain must prioritise values over commercial interests. Several Conservative MPs immediately shouted objections. One could be heard saying, "He's destroying our economic future." The pound sterling began falling in real-time trading. Then came Starmer's most devastating statement. Let me be absolutely clear. This government believes that unresolved colonial legacies must be addressed before moving forward. We are establishing a commission to examine potential reparations for historical wrongs committed during British rule in India. With those words, Starmer didn't just modify British foreign policy. He detonated a diplomatic bomb under Britain's most promising post-Brexit economic relationship. Within minutes of the speech concluding, Prime Minister Modi called an emergency cabinet meeting in New Delhi. Indian television networks cancelled scheduled programming to broadcast from outside the government complex. At 11:47 p.m. London time, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman emerged to deliver an announcement that has sent shockwaves through the global economy. Today marks a fundamental reassessment of India's relationship with the United Kingdom, she began, her voice measured but resolute. Prime Minister Modi has instructed our government to immediately implement the following measures. The list that followed was devastating. Withdrawal of all sovereign wealth fund investments from British markets, approximately £300 billion. Immediate suspension of planned corporate investments worth £200 billion. Cancellation of defence contracts valued at £42 billion. Revocation of visas for British businesses operating in India, and most shocking of all, a surcharge on all British imports effective immediately. India remains open for business with partners who approach us with respect, Sitharaman concluded. Unfortunately, the United Kingdom no longer qualifies as such a partner. International reaction was swift and punishing. The IMF issued a statement of deep concern about potential global market instability. Japan's finance minister warned about contagion effects across Asian investments in European markets. Even the European Union, despite post-Brexit tensions, expressed alarm about unnecessary economic disruption during already challenging times. Meanwhile, ordinary British citizens whose livelihoods depend on Anglo-Indian trade are facing immediate consequences. William Thompson, a 58-year-old factory manager from Birmingham whose company produces components for Indian automotive manufacturers, told reporters, "We've just had orders worth £17 million cancelled overnight. That's 340 jobs at risk in our community alone. What was the Prime Minister thinking?" Across Britain, similar stories are emerging. In Glasgow, Edinburgh, Manchester and dozens of other cities, businesses with Indian connections are calculating devastating losses. The Confederation of British Industry estimates that over 175,000 jobs are immediately at risk. While Starmer and his cabinet defend what they call a principled position, British pension funds are watching billions in value evaporate. The Financial Times reports that the average British pension has lost 4.2% of its value in a single day. We're talking about an unprecedented economic catastrophe triggered by a single diplomatic miscalculation. On one side, a government claiming moral high ground. On the other, the world's fastest growing major economy, flexing its considerable financial muscle. The contrast is so stark, so financially ruinous, that even traditional Labour supporters are questioning Starmer's judgment. Former Chancellor Gordon Brown issued a statement calling for immediate diplomatic reconciliation before irreparable economic damage occurs. Then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. As markets continued their freefall and the pound hit a 37-year low against the dollar, desperate measures were deployed at the highest levels of government. At precisely 2:15 a.m. London time, Prime Minister Starmer initiated an emergency video call with Prime Minister Modi. What was intended to be a private diplomatic exchange was inadvertently broadcast to waiting Indian media when an aide in New Delhi failed to disable the camera feed. For 17 excruciating minutes, the British public witnessed their Prime Minister essentially begging for economic mercy. The footage, now viral across social media, shows Starmer visibly distressed. "Prime Minister Modi," he began, his voice strained, "I urge you to reconsider these measures. The economic consequences for ordinary British citizens will be devastating. We can resolve our differences through proper diplomatic channels." Modi remained impassive, letting Starmer continue his increasingly desperate appeal. "Perhaps my comments were misinterpreted," Starmer suggested. "Britain has the utmost respect for India's sovereignty. We can immediately pause the proposed commission. We can expedite the trade agreement. Please, let us find a solution before markets open." Modi's response was brief and crushing. "Prime Minister, actions have consequences. Britain has chosen to lecture rather than respect. My duty is to protect India's dignity and interests. The economic measures will continue until your government demonstrates genuine change in its approach." The call ended abruptly, leaving Starmer staring at a blank screen. Government sources reveal he remained silent for nearly a minute before instructing staff to do whatever it takes to mitigate the damage. The optics were catastrophic. Within hours, the hashtag #Starmer BEGS was trending globally. British diplomatic prestige, carefully cultivated over centuries, collapsed overnight. Conservative MP and former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly called it the most humiliating moment in modern British diplomatic history. Even traditional media outlets struggled to find positive spin, with the Times headline reading, "National Humiliation, PM pleads as economy burns." Within hours of the leaked call, Britain's economic crisis deepened dramatically. The London Stock Exchange suspended trading after a 9% drop triggered automatic circuit breakers. For the first time since the 2008 financial crisis, trading was halted to prevent market panic. The banking sector was hit particularly hard. HSBC, with significant Asian exposure, saw shares plummet 17%. Barclays fell 14%. NatWest Group required Bank of England reassurances to prevent a run on deposits. Credit rating agency Moody's announced an immediate review of Britain's sovereign debt status, warning of a potential downgrade that would increase borrowing costs across the economy. The property market showed immediate stress signals. Estate agents reported overseas investors cancelling purchases worth hundreds of millions. Commercial property values in London fell 6% overnight. International reaction further isolated Britain economically. Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, all with significant Indian diaspora populations and strong economic ties to India, announced they would reassess investment strategies regarding the UK. The United States, caught between two important allies, offered only tepid support, stating it encouraged dialogue while emphasising the importance of respect for sovereign economic decisions. Social media exploded with panic as ordinary Britons realised the implications for their daily media and lives. Videos of Modi's dismissive response to Starmer received over 50 million views worldwide. British business leaders with Indian connections publicly questioned the Starmer government's competence. The economic consequences cascaded through every sector. Energy companies warned of price increases as Indian conglomerates cancelled natural gas supply contracts. Technology firms announced hiring freezes as Indian outsourcing partnerships collapsed. Universities calculated catastrophic revenue losses as Indian student applications were withdrawn. Inside Westminster, what began as foreign policy quickly became a fight for political survival. Cabinet WhatsApp messages leaked to the Daily Mail revealed ministers in complete panic. "We've created an economic Suez crisis," wrote one cabinet member. "The Treasury says this could wipe 3% off GDP. How do we survive that politically?" Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds reportedly warned of mass unemployment in key constituencies if Indian measures continued. "We're looking at 200,000 plus job losses, concentrated in industrial areas that voted for us." This is existential. Chancellor Rachel Reeves was even more alarmed. "The markets are in free fall. Pension funds are bleeding billions. Inflation projections have doubled overnight. We need to reverse course immediately." But sources close to Starmer describe him as paralysed by indecision. During an emergency cabinet meeting at 4:30 a.m, the Prime Minister reportedly asked repeatedly, "How did we not see this coming? Why wasn't I warned about potential Indian reaction?" 4 junior ministers have already submitted resignation letters, according to Westminster sources. Each cited the economic catastrophe and Starmer's humiliating diplomatic performance as their reasons for stepping down. More concerning for Starmer, several senior Labour MPs representing constituencies with significant Anglo-Indian business connections have requested an emergency party meeting. Rumours of a potential leadership challenge have moved from whispers to open discussion. Conservative leader Rishi Sunak, Britain's first Prime Minister of Indian heritage, has seized the moment with devastating effectiveness. In a statement delivered outside Parliament, flanked by British Indian business leaders, he systematically dismantled the government's position. In a single, ill-conceived speech, Sunak declared, "This government has destroyed Britain's most promising post-Brexit economic relationship. £500 billion, half a trillion. That's the cost of Starmer's moral grandstanding." And who pays? Not ministers with their secure salaries and pensions. Ordinary working people across Britain will pay with their jobs, their savings, and their futures. But here's the revelation that could permanently destroy Starmer's position. Treasury documents leaked to the Financial Times confirm that the government received explicit warnings about potential Indian economic retaliation 48 hours before Starmer's speech. If these reports are accurate and multiple sources now confirm them, then the Prime Minister deliberately ignored economic security briefings to make a political statement. Think about what that means. A Prime Minister potentially sacrificing his country's economic stability for what appears to be ideological posturing. The damage goes beyond immediate market losses to questions about basic governmental competence and responsibility. Senior civil servants have reportedly compiled a formal assessment of the anticipated economic impact over the next 5 years. 3 separate sources confirm the Treasury's nightmare scenario projects cumulative losses exceeding £1.2 trillion, roughly half of Britain's annual GDP. The ramifications extend far beyond immediate market turmoil. Investment analysts warn that India's actions have triggered a fundamental reassessment of Britain's economic viability. "This isn't just about Indian investments," explained Dr. Harish Patel of the London School of Economics. "It's about global perception of UK stability. When a major power like India publicly withdraws confidence, others inevitably follow. While Starmer struggles for a response and Labour fractures, opposition parties are positioning themselves as the only hope for economic salvation. The polls tell a devastating story for Labour. After maintaining a comfortable lead since the election, the party now trails the Conservatives by 9 points, the largest deficit since taking office. More concerning, public trust in Labour's economic competence has collapsed to just 17%, the lowest recorded figure in modern polling. For the first time, serious discussions about a government collapse are emerging from Westminster sources. The next 72 hours are critical. Treasury officials are working through the night to prevent complete financial meltdown when markets reopen. Foreign Office diplomats are attempting to establish back-channel communications with their Indian counterparts. Business leaders are pleading for government intervention to save thousands of companies from bankruptcy. The question is no longer whether Starmer's statement was morally justified. It's whether Britain's economy can survive this self-inflicted wound. Britain is facing an economic crisis that could eclipse both the 2008 financial crash and the COVID pandemic in its severity and duration. This catastrophe will be studied for decades as a case study in how fragile international economic relationships can collapse over diplomatic miscalculations. At its centre stands Keir Starmer, a Prime Minister who entered office promising steady, competent leadership but now finds himself presiding over economic ruin. Facing him is Narendra Modi, leader of a rising global power, increasingly confident in asserting its economic influence. History suggests that when Western moral pronouncements collide with Eastern economic realities, economics usually prevails. So here's the question that matters. Did Starmer just destroy Britain's economic future for a moment of post-colonial virtue signalling? Or will his government find a way to repair relations with India before permanent damage is done to the UK economy? What do you think? Should Britain prioritise diplomatic humility to restore economic relationships or maintain its moral stance regardless of the financial consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if this economic crisis shocked you as much as it shocked us, share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's really happening between London and New Delhi right now. The mainstream media won't show you the full economic implications, but we will. Next week, we'll reveal exclusive details about emergency measures being prepared by the Bank of England. Information that could help you protect your savings from what financial experts are calling the new British Depression.